Do you ever feel disappointed with yourself for the way you're reacting to things? Maybe you feel jealous about a friend's success, or you yelled at the kids, or you could be someone who has caring responsibilities for someone you love, and sometimes you feel resentful towards that person, even though you love them, and then you feel guilty about that. Often our reactions just don't seem to line up with the kind of person we want to be. And so I wanted to record a video about this for you today. But I also really wanted to come to the beach because we're having good weather in the UK and it's like the first gasp of summer. So I brought you with me. I hope you don't mind. And I hope the waves are more soothing than distracting. The thing is, when we want to change how we're reacting to something, just saying to ourselves, I'm going to try and react differently next time, often doesn't work, no matter how sincerely we mean it. And so I want to talk about a different approach, something that I believe really works. I've seen it work in my own life and I've seen it work with my clients. But first of all, I need to tell you that I have not had decent Wi-Fi working in my apartment for the last over 2 weeks now. And the most frustrating part about it is how my internet provider has handled it. And now I can feel my ego wanting to tell you all the details so that you can understand my reaction and why I've become as agitated as I have about it. But I'm just watching that play out in my mind, and I will just have more respect for your time. But suffice to say, there's been a series of human errors, which has meant that my Wi-Fi is still not working. And I live in a bit of a phone dead spot, so tethering to my phone, the signal's not very good either. So everything's taking longer, everything's disrupted. And I've been really worked up about this, like righteously indignant about this. And I have complained about this to those closest to me. And a few times I've been quite aware of this and I've thought, I really want to be able to just let this go, because the kind of person I want to be the kind of person who accepts the things they cannot control. Because I know that when I do that, the freedom and relief and peace that brings, and yes, it still means that things can be challenging, but when there isn't that constant mental resistance and narration and battling, and I'm grumbling in my own mind about it all the time, or at least quite a lot of the time, I want to be the kind of person who rolls with the punches, who has compassion for other humans and recognizes that we all make human mistakes. That's the kind of person I want to be. And I feel like my reaction has not demonstrated that over the last couple of weeks. And I was watching the news a couple of nights ago, and in Spain and Portugal, they've had these massive power outages, which have brought trains to a standstill. It's meant millions of homes have been without power, let alone internet. And I had a moment of perspective. I had a moment where I thought, do you know what? Okay, this is frustrating. It's not the end of the world. It could be worse. And in that moment, thinking like that brought me some relief. However, and here's the interesting part. About an hour later, a friend sends me a voice note, and in the voice note, she mentions these power outages. And of course she knows about my Wi-Fi problem because, like I said, I've been complaining. And she says to me, something along the lines of, now she might watch this and go, that's not what I said, but it was along the lines of, it could be worse. Like, look what's going on in Spain and Portugal. Kind of puts things into perspective. And I felt my reaction, this is not what she was saying, I don't believe this is what she was saying at all, but I felt really defensive because I felt like the message in that was my reaction is wrong. And because I was already aware that I wasn't very happy about my own reaction to the situation with the Wi-Fi, it just hit a tender spot for me. Now, perspective is an interesting one because, of course, by all kinds of different metrics that we could try to measure, there's always going to be somebody out there who seems to have it worse. You might have a broken leg, somebody else might have 2 broken legs. Does that mean you should be grateful that you don't have 2 broken legs? There could be a time and a place for that. But the minute you feel like that's how you should react, you're now in a conflict with yourself about how you're really feeling. And here's the point I want to make. Your emotional reactions are not wrong. There's no morality, I believe I would die on this hill. I believe there is no morality in the emotions that you feel. And I think the minute you start thinking I shouldn't be feeling the way that I feel, you end up simply feeling worse. You know, maybe you're feeling guilty for feeling jealous, or you're feeling shame about feeling angry. And all of that feeds the reactivity. So when it was just me, like noticing, oh, this is going on in Spain and Portugal, and it gave me that bit of perspective, and I wasn't making myself wrong, I could shift, like I could change perspective and I could zoom out. But the minute I felt like, and this was my stuff, not hers, the minute I felt like there was an implication that my reaction was wrong, I suddenly felt really defensive about how I'd been feeling. And I wanted to double down on how frustrating my situation was. There is a time and place for shifting perspective, but I think it's really unhelpful to try to shift your perspective from a place of, I need to shift my perspective because how I'm feeling about this situation is wrong. When you just acknowledge that, yes, that is just how you're feeling. You're a human being who sometimes has big emotions. And if you want to understand why your emotions are as big as they are, ask yourself, what am I believing about myself and this situation? And when you start pulling out those thoughts, your emotions will start to make sense. So what that would look like in my Wi-Fi example is, I am thinking, this is slowing down all my work. This is disrupting my Zoom calls. This is making my editing and my uploading longer. This didn't need to go on as long as it has. This is just people not doing their job properly, and that's making my life harder. When you stack all those beliefs on top of each other, no wonder I was a stressed out mess. And so then when I have compassion for that and I go, well, of course, look at what my mind was telling me. No wonder I reacted that way. I offer myself the compassion first, and then I can have more compassion for the people at TalkTalk who made the errors and who had to go through frustrating, lengthy systems. I'm not going to get into it. I can feel my mind already wanting to spin stories about it and get myself all worked up. But I can see that I can go, of course, like this is what minds do. They want to hook on and they want to judge and label and blame. And so when I pull it back and I go, that's just what my mind does, as opposed to that's what I do. Like our reactions are reactivity, especially reactivity. Sorry, a bee just flew at me. I don't know whether to leave that in. And I have decided I will leave me freaking out at a bee in this video because I feel like it is another good example of a reaction that I wish I didn't react that way. But my nervous system just seems to react like that to any kind of insects or bugs. And that has been, believe it or not, it's actually been quite a deep source of shame for me because I can be with people who, there's wasps everywhere and everyone is just able to sit and have a good time, and I'm constantly freaked out about these wasps and on edge. And so by leaving it in the video, it's actually a challenge to my own self-judgment that I have about that reaction, and an opportunity to practice what I'm preaching about compassion and normalizing having reactions that we don't like and reactions that seem to be out of our control. So our reactivity, especially our reactivity that feels like big and painful, it comes from what our minds are telling us. It doesn't come from the deep sense of who you are. The problem is we over-identify with the mind. Whereas now when I'm talking to you and I'm just watching my mind, I'm going, oh yeah, that's what minds do. And that can be okay. And when I go, that's what my mind does, that's another way of reducing the self-judgment. Because when I see people start to validate what they feel and stop making themselves wrong all the time, it's one of those paradoxes where when you have compassion and you don't make yourself wrong for your reactivity can calm down. It can feel safe because you're reacting, because usually you think there's some kind of injustice that you need to fight, or that you're under attack and you need to defend yourself, or that you think that your boundaries are being breached and you're trying to put them in place. But it comes from reactivity when there is no self-compassion, when there is no self-curiosity. So here's the takeaways. Your reactions absolutely make sense based on your history and what your mind is telling you in the moment. And when you can recognize that that is just something your mind does, not really who you are, because if it was who you are, you probably wouldn't even be that bothered about changing it. The fact that you're looking at it and you're going, this doesn't feel like who I am. This doesn't feel like the person I want to be, I think speaks volumes for who you might want to be. The problem is then the mind jumps in and then starts wanting to judge you for not being the person you think you should be. Once you've done these things, once the reactivity has calmed down or has at least been validated, then that's the time to go, okay, what might need to shift in my perspective? If you try to shift your perspective while you are still in your reaction and while you're still judging your reaction and all that motion and energy is still moving, it's going to be harder to do, and it will either feel fake or you will just feel worse about yourself that you can't put things into perspective. You keep overreacting in your mind. And I know I've touched on acceptance and accepting the things that are outside of your control. And that can be a tough one to embody, because sometimes it's hard to know, am I accepting something or am I just being passive and giving up? And if that's something you've wondered about, you might want to check out this, I can never remember which side, this video here